So my first question will be like, how do you define cybersecurity in your words?
Yeah, cybersecurity is about protecting value as it pertains to computers and information systems and network. It's actually quite simple. People overcomplicate it all the time. The terms shift. Like at one time, like long time ago, we used to talk about data security, then information security. The term cyber or cybersecurity actually comes out of I think it comes out of the United States military, but it encompasses more than just information and data. Yeah.
So yeah, there's one more thing is like regarding cybersecurity itself, like how would you define like traditional types of traditional methods, or like how it's getting revolutionized in terms of like traditional and in terms of like modern era. So how would you define that thing?
Yeah, it's really hard to pin down cybersecurity even as a profession. This is one of the problems for people who want out of the field. There's no direct path. There's no clean and simple set of job roles. People come from all different kind of backgrounds and all kinds of different educational experiences and job experiences. The field. So what's happened? One of the things that's happened is computing is just bigger. And in fact, I posted a link. By the time people hear this, will probably be a while. But if you look at my link, you'll see an article I posted about just how big the field is. Historically, it's been very U.S. centric, or U.S. and somewhat to some degree European. But like the capital comes from the United States, it comes from Wall Street, Silicon Valley being in the United States. It tends to be very sort of provincial. One of the things that I do in my work is try and break through that. So I live in Mexico, hence Mexican daughter. And I work with people all over the world. But a lot of people just don't see the field that way. The internet is global. The problems are global. Used to be that people would say, lamentably around 9/11 time, people were fond of saying that on the internet, Osama bin Laden is your next door neighbor. Now on the internet, Russia's your next door neighbor, China's your next door neighbor. And that's the bad news. The good news is if you're in London, you can communicate very easily with somebody sitting in Oaxaca, Mexico, and it doesn't matter, right? And so we get to use this. So that's one thing. So the market in so many ways is global. The diversity of skills that people need has also, it was always broad. People didn't know it. So to do, like the field of cybersecurity includes, yes, penetration testing. It includes incident response, engineering, and things like that. But it also includes things that people don't think about at all, like accounting and cost management and enterprise architecture and, the sort of basic management of people and stuff and logistics and all this other stuff and law, right? And so a lot of people who are trying to get into the field come to me and say, I've been working on my ethical hacking, whatever, or I've been working on, on my pen testing certification. And I'm like, well, that's very nice, except there are a couple of problems with that. One is breaking things is only part of the deal. Knowing how they work under normal conditions is at least as important. And understanding how the systems that you're trying to pop, even if you do so successfully, serve the business is extremely important. Not just because like you might cause problems, but because like prioritization is important. Understanding what the damage would be if you were able to cause it either in a simulated way or if you're a malicious adversary. It's really important. The other problem with pen testing is it's rapidly getting automated and commodified out. It's actually a really terrible way into the industry. It's not to say some people don't do it, but you really it's so much more difficult to get for pen testing to be your point of entry into the industry. There are a lot of conversations in the field about like the idea of entry level roles, and people who've been around for a long time, I've been at this for 25 years, will say there's really no such thing as an entry level role. That is a highly nuanced statement, however. everybody has their first security job. My example is, I had my first security job when I had my first security job. In mine, I went to work for one of the largest financial institutions in the world. It's in my LinkedIn. You
Yeah.
can read it if you want. But I went in as a technical writer, as a temp. I was going to be there for 3 months, documenting firewall processes. I'd never touched a firewall before. I kind of knew what one was. I didn't know how TCP/IP worked, but I was going to document the migration of the firewall function from one city to another. And they were doing some other things. I started to learn and I started to figure out how things worked. And before I knew it, I was managing the first SOC that they had. There was a nominal manager, but I was actually doing it. And I was able to create value in this department that was really running a worldwide secure operation and innovating in all sorts of interesting ways. Working with brilliant people, simply because I just know how to get stuff done. And I added value in ways that were right in front of me. I didn't go to anybody and say, hey, can I have a security job, please? I didn't say to anybody, I want an internship or any of that stuff. And I get that all the time. I just presented myself and said, how can I help? And they said, well, do this thing. And I'm like, okay. And then I didn't screw it up too badly. And they liked me. And they say, well, do something like this. And before I knew it, I was running intrusion detection and vulnerability scanning globally for this huge organization. All because I wanted to help, and I did. And they recognized that I could do that. And I didn't know anything at the time. I learned the details of it much later. So that was my story. But, long and the short of it is that cybersecurity is much more diverse, much more complex than most people know who are in the field know. People who are getting in know that even less. Here's the good news. That one point of entry that the training industry sells people, and it really is the training people who are saying, get your EJPT, or get your CEH or whatever, and that will set you up for success. That you can use that to get a job. They're just trying to sell you services. They're just trying to sell you training. And frankly, they're doing probably the people who are listening to it or watching this, and people who try and recruit. I'm not a recruiter, but I recruit a lot. It makes things very difficult for all of us. Instead, people need to understand like the broader context. We can talk about it if you like.
Sure. Speaking about the accountability, so what exactly you would be taking into consideration for like me starting up a new job role into security itself?
Yeah.
So what points should I be taking into considerations? Like what are the few basic terminologies which I should be aware of as a new starter?
You need to be aware of two sets of terminology. One is cyber terminology, which is readily available, right? There are glossaries available all over the place. There are lists of acronyms all over the place that have to do with with technology and compliance and things like that. The other set of technology that is at least as important is that which pertains to the business that you're going into or that you're in. Right. So if you're going to work, let's say you're working in. Actually, I was talking to yesterday a guy who works in retail. He works in he's a manager in an electronics retailer. And he came to me, he said, can I have an internship? I said, well, no, I don't have an internship. What about the company you're working for? And do they have IT? Do they have security? Are they big enough for that? And they didn't have enough, they don't have enough, they're not big enough for security, but they do have IT, which means IT is doing security. He understands retail. He understands their business, their terminology, and he was studying for the rest. And so his path into the field was very simple. My advice to him, and it was the kind of advice I give to just about anybody, is make sure that you have access to the IT or security team. Contact the head of that team, or just approach people directly and say, I'm interested in making a transition laterally into your part of the business. I understand this part of the business. I have relationships. I have knowledge of how it operates. Can I help out? Not what you can do for me. What can I do for you? And you'll find that, we all hear about the shortage of labor and talent in IT and security. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. But there's also a shortage of talent in IT and security among people who understand the business that the people are hiring for. So it's a natural advantage. You're a student, right?
Yeah.
You have experience in your university. You know that environment. You're a customer of their services in a way,
Yeah.
right? So that's how I see that. I mean, expanding on the terminology question a little bit, but that's how I see it, and that's how it usually works out.
Mhm. Okay, so it's like you talked about someone approached you as he was into the sales itself. So right now over here also itself, like in my part time, I do as a sales itself. I'm
Hmm.
a retail sales advisor at O2 itself. So even I am going for like there are like couple of things which I need to I'm taking into considerations. Like even I'm selling up a services, so even I'm representing a company. Like before selling up the services, I'm representing my company. I'm showcasing what the company does and what all these things does. So that are the things. So I was able to relate it what you were saying exactly. I was able to get all the connecting points which you were saying up. So that was the thing.
Well, I'm so glad you
And
mentioned. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because there are people in cybersecurity sales who
Mhm,
make crazy money and have a great time doing it. Like some of the best salespeople I know in security
mhm,
have CISSPs. They're like, most of their job is explaining technology and
mhm,
services and things like that, and working with procurement, because procurement doesn't understand security, but they've got to make decisions about security, and they don't have anybody to help them. And so
mhm,
this is like, people are surprised all the time, like where all these opportunities are. And that's an excellent
mhm.
example. Maybe you will have a career in cybersecurity sales as well. Like, it's a great deal.
Maybe that's like pre-sales or something. Is it? We can term it like that.
Oh, there's pre-sales and there's straight up sales. Like, I know, so I used to work for a company called Optiv, which at one
Hmm.
time I think was the largest pure play cybersecurity
Hmm.
VAR in the world.
Hmm.
If they weren't the biggest in the world, they were big in the United States. And I know people who were like, they were strategic account reps. I'm not going to name any of them, but if they hear this, they will know who I'm talking about, and they were sales reps who partnered with SEs, with sales engineers. And these sales reps, they studied, like they knew security pretty well.
Hmm.
They worked hard, and most of what they did didn't look like security, but they were talking about security at a strategic level, in terms of value to the business, in terms of risk.
Hmm.
They would never lay hands on a SIM or a firewall, but most security is not technical, really. It's
Hmm.
it A lot of it is kind of adjacent to that. Much of it is collaborative, right? Most of like a lot of us get into security because we don't really like people.
Hmm.
And there was a time when you got into security because
Yeah.
because you complained a lot. Like, it
Yeah.
was like, this is like in the 90s, and like you're like the crusty dude with the beard that had soup in it. Like, and nobody, and like, you're smart and you get stuff done, and you know how to like write good shell scripts. And
Understandable.
right, yeah, exactly. And people are just like, we got the security problem. Give it to him. And it was almost always him. There are hardly any women in those days. There were a few.
Hmm.
Um, and that became kind of the standard profile, was like the antisocial security dude. That's totally changed, right? And why did it change? Well, for one thing, it doesn't work. Security is so tightly integrated and so broadly interconnected with everything else. It's a
Hmm.
it's a team sport now,
Yeah.
right? I've been a CISO, and I'm a CEO now, but I'm a CISO of my own thing. As a CISO, um, um, you rely on a lot of resources from the CIO.
Yeah.
CIO has enterprise architects. CIO has finance people, budget people, PMO perhaps. A lot of the time, usually they have at least one product manager. They may have risk analysts, compliance analysts, all this other stuff. CISO doesn't usually have that staff. They don't have those resources. And so you've got to work with these people. So you go to the enterprise architect to do security architecture. You go to the finance analyst to work at the security budget. You work with general counsel on incident response planning. You work with corporate communications and public relations as part of the same effort. And so now, instead of being where you go because you don't want to deal with people, and most of us are introverts, but we still have to figure out how to collaborate with people on things that they don't necessarily care about. Right? Like,
truly understandable. Yeah.
yeah.